Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're traveling to Varanasi. It's India's holiest city, perched right on the banks of the Ganges River, and we're going to explore a completely, and I mean completely, different cultural approach to mortality. You know, in a lot of the world, death is tucked away. It's treated as this ultimate tragedy, almost like a taboo. But in Varanasi, the whole perspective shifts dramatically. Millions of devout Hindus believe that dying in this very specific city brings unparalleled spiritual rewards. So here, death isn't just accepted, it's literally woven into the everyday fabric of life.
Okay, let's dive into this. What if death just wasn't something to fear? It's a pretty provocative question, right? Because for those of us used to a much more Western, highly sterile, hospital-bound perspective on dying, the end of life is usually something we try to push as far out of our minds as humanly possible. But in Varanasi, the reality of death is visibly celebrated. It's happening right out in the open. It challenges absolutely everything we might assume about grief, about loss, and about those final moments of human existence.
Section 1. The City of Salvation, where death is a celebration.
So at the very heart of this explainer is a concept known as moksha. Basically, in Hindu belief, souls are caught in this endless, often painful cycle of death and rebirth. You live, you die, you're reborn, over and over again. Moksha is the ultimate liberation from that exhausting cycle. It is pure salvation. And the devout believe that if you draw your final breath specifically in the city of Varanasi, you instantly achieve this liberation. That single theological belief is the massive magnetic force driving millions of people to travel to the city for their final days.
To put the sheer weight of moksha into perspective, just think about the number 8.4 million. In this tradition, believers hold that a soul actually has to cycle through 8.4 million different life forms before it's finally blessed enough to be born as a human. I mean, think about that immense journey. Being born human is seen as this incredibly rare, precious window. Really, it's the only state of existence where you can actually achieve salvation. And if you miss your chance to break the cycle during your human life, well, you have to go through that entire 8.4 million step process all over again.
Now, the absolute focal point of all this salvation is the Ganges River, and it reveals this fascinating duality. Scientifically speaking, studies show the water in Varanasi is highly toxic and polluted, honestly to the point where fish can barely even survive in it. But in the faithful reality, this river is the physical manifestation of the goddess Ganga. Bathing in it washes away your sins, and drinking it cures illnesses. Take Rambali, for example. He's a 73-year-old boatman who has rowed on this river for 50 years. For him, the science simply doesn't matter. He drinks the water every single day, and he credits his lifelong health and energy entirely to its holy power.
Section 2. 15 Days to Die, the House of Salvation.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the cost. Just 20 cents. That is the remarkably low nightly rate for a sparse, highly sterile room at Mukti Bahan, which is a hospice specifically designed for those on the absolute brink of death. For 20 cents, you get 2 beds, one for the dying and one for a family member staying with them. The price is kept this incredibly low, mostly just to cover basic electricity, but it serves a much deeper purpose.
As priest Kant Dub explains, that super low fee comes with a very strict rule. You only get 15 days to die. If you aren't actively dying, you simply cannot stay. Now, to a Western mindset, being handed a strict 15-day limit to pass away sounds incredibly stressful, right? Like this giant ticking clock on your final breaths. But for devout Hindus, it is completely welcomed. They aren't there for comfort or for a free place to crash. They're there strictly for the business of salvation. The space acts as a waiting room for ultimate freedom.
Section 3. Living Among the Dead, the Business of Mortality.
I want you to meet Potosi. He's a 33-year-old cremator at the Manikarnika Ghat, which is the main cremation area. As a member of the Dom caste, historically one of the lowest in Indian society, this really difficult work falls to him. He earns just 2.5 euros per fire, working relentlessly in heavy smoke and the intense smell of burning bodies. And during his breaks, he wades into the murky, glass-filled river just to sift through the ashes, hoping to find dropped valuables, like gold chains. It is a grueling, totally visceral existence. But Potosi works with immense dignity. He treats the dead with deep respect, even talking to them as he works. And his ultimate motivation for all of this? He dreams of his 3 kids getting an education and becoming engineers, so they never, ever have to breathe in this smoke.
And right alongside Potosi, you find these absolutely astonishing stories of survival. Take Kajal. She's a 9-year-old homeless girl who paints her face every single day to look like the Hindu deity Shiva.
She wanders through the crowds and tourists collecting small donations, maybe bringing in about €5 a day. Why? To fund her mother's desperate need for heart surgery. She is navigating these overlapping worlds of life and death every single day with this stark, completely fearless resilience. She isn't afraid of the environment she's in. Her only fear is losing her mom.
Section 4. Breaking the rebirth cycle. The final ritual.
This brings us to the deeply personal story of 82-year-old Shriya TR. 20 members of his family actually traveled to Varanasi, bringing him to a hospice to oversee his passing. He was blind, heavily relying on a ventilator. And during his final days, a sudden power outage struck the city, and the ventilator stopped. Naturally, the room grew pretty restless. But as his son Satendra explained, their profound sadness was fundamentally mixed with joy. Yes, they were losing their father, but they were also securing his ultimate happiness. By passing away in Varanasi, they believed he was finally breaking that agonizing cycle of rebirth. It's this incredible duality, right? A mix of sharp grief and just profound relief.
Let's move to and see how this builds into the final cremation ritual. In a moment that could so easily be visually and emotionally overwhelming, there's actually a deeply comforting order to it all. First off, the eldest son shaves his head as a physical sign of respect and mourning. Next, the family organizes the purchase of about 400 kilograms of firewood, which costs roughly €100. They then carefully place their loved one on the wood and physically ignite the pyre themselves, right there on the banks of the Ganges. And finally, the eldest son taps the deceased's skull 3 times. It's this vital symbolic gesture meant to literally crack the skull and physically release the soul into liberation.
Section 5. Making peace with death. Changing perspectives.
You know, when death is this visible, it kind of loses its terrifying mystery. Just take it from Ram Yadav, a 7th-generation tea seller working right next to the cremation ghats. Grieving families come to his shop literally every day, and his comfort to them is incredibly direct. He says, everyone is moral, everyone has to go someday. There's no reason to cry. Because he lives in such close proximity to mortality day in and day out, he has completely lost the fear of it. For him, death is just another natural, predestined part of the human journey. It is best, he says, to just make friends with it.
So the crucial point we arrive at through this whole explainer is this final question. Could embracing the reality of our own mortality actually help us live more freely? By hiding death away in sterile rooms, do we accidentally give it way more power and fear than it deserves? What Varanasi shows us is that when you bring death out of the shadows, when you treat it as a natural, accepted, and even celebrated part of life, it might just dissolve our greatest anxieties. It's a pretty powerful thought to leave you with, isn't it? Perhaps making peace with the end of our story is exactly what allows us to truly appreciate the chapters we're living right now. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.